Good morning. Let me start by saying this morning that your leader, my friend Reverend Mark Pettis, is a very good man, a much better man than I. You see, every time I have come to give a sermon on this pulpit, he has offered me a psalm, an easy, non-controversial text from which to base my remarks. Today, he gave me the beautiful psalm we just heard, Psalm 126, which talks about two topics that are at the essence of who I am as a rabbi. The first is joy and laughter, the topic of which I'm going to speak about today. And the other is the land of Israel, which I will save for another day. When Reverend Pettis comes to our synagogue, I offer him more weighty topics to speak about. The last few years, it has been skin disease and leprosy. The Torah portion, the reading from the Torah for the weekend he was visiting. And next year, I'm already lining up for you what I want you to speak about from the Torah portions of animal sacrifice, slavery, or the laws of purity and impurity. So you can choose. There you go. My colleague, Rabbi Richard Camrus, loves to tell the story of the child who missed religious school because he was sick. And his brother comes home from school, and he says to his brother, "I missed religious school today. What country did we get kicked out of?" Because for so long, education in Jewish schools was, on this year we got kicked out of that country, and on that year we got kicked out of that country. And it's part of an endless parade that the Jewish people have endured until our day. Jews across the globe recently celebrated the holiday of Purim, which is based on the scroll and story of Esther. We remember how the evil Haman tried to kill us, and they didn't succeed in Haman's generation. And so Haman arose anew in this generation and that generation, and you get the continuous cycle of pain and persecution. But here's the strange thing about the holiday of Purim. What are Jews supposed to do on the holiday of Purim? It's a day of joy, of laughter, of celebration, of making fun of the tradition and making fun of the rabbis. There's nobody that you are not allowed to mock on Purim. Even in the most traditional circles, they mock their rabbis. Not, by the way, at my synagogue, but in the most traditional synagogues. And so you say to yourself, what is this about? After all, if Purim is the quintessential holiday of they tried to destroy us, are we really just happy because they didn't succeed? That isn't much of a source of joy. I'm so happy that I wasn't quite killed. You begin to realize that Judaism teaches, if you pay attention to the current that goes underneath the story of the Jewish people, that despite the fact that we are acutely alive to pain, and we are aware of anguish in this world, and we don't turn away from it, and we don't hide from it, but the deeper current of Judaism is joy. The rabbis speak of the joy of doing a mitzvah, a commandment, and that is primarily not because you are doing the commandment, it's primarily because you are alive. You are in a world filled with wonder. You are in a universe of marvels. There's a star-sown night and clouds and sun during the day. You open your eyes and you can see anything. There are other human beings. There's a natural world of plants and animals and mountains and trees and lakes and forests and deserts. And all of that should bring joy. The world is full, chock full of things that are new experiences and also old experiences that you can have again and again and again. which is why I'm going to tell you an actual teaching that comes from the rabbis of the Talmud that you might not know, and most of my congregants, I bet, don't know it. But it says the following: God will call you to account for every pleasure that you saw and didn't participate in. Now understand that that doesn't mean that when you go out into the parking lot after services that you can take the Tesla that doesn't belong to you. But what it does mean is that God will call you to account for the pleasures that you saw. So what does that mean? The first meaning, I believe, is that you should in fact indulge yourself in the pleasures of this world. God made all these things, and all too often we close our eyes. There's a wonderful story about the great Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch. He's the founder of modern orthodoxy in Judaism. And in the 19th century, he told his disciples that in his early 80s, for the first time in his life, he was going to take a walking tour of the Alps. And when they asked him why, he said, because I know that when I die and I get to be in front of God, God is going to say to me, Samson, did you see my Alps? Because God created this magnificent beauty, how can I not see it? So the first meaning is that we should, in fact, take joy from the things that give us joy in this world. But the second meaning, I believe, is that when you participate in something that should give you joy, feel joyous, right? If you're going to eat the chocolate cake, don't take every bite saying, I really shouldn't be eating this. Don't destroy the joy that having joy can bring you. And don't assume that pleasure is intrinsically bad. It's not bad. Like anything else, it can be bad, depending. But in and of itself, it is a gift of God to the world. And when my congregants laugh and make fun and drown out the name of Haman on Purim, when we celebrate that holiday as we did a few weeks ago, that is so much in the spirit of the Jewish tradition. If you believe there is a God who created the world, and that ultimately there is justice, then this is a good place. Not a painless place, but a good place. And the joy that it offers us is the joy God wants us to have. And even when my community remembers an attempt to wipe out our people, we do it with the understanding that there is an undercurrent of joy at being alive, with a sense of gratitude. I don't know if this is true in any other tradition. Maybe it is. But one thing I know is that in the Jewish tradition, one of our patriarchs, one of the pillars of the Jewish people, is named laughter. Yitzhak, Isaac, that's his name. Yitzhak means laughter. And let me tell you something about the name of all our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And you could even include Joseph, Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, and Yosef. God only named one of them from birth, Isaac, Yitzhak. The name that God chooses for the only patriarch that God will name is laughter. Not pain, not suffering, not sorrow, but laughter. I don't think there is a coincidence in noting that there is a long, I don't think it's just a coincidence in noting that there's a long and noble history of comedy in the Jewish tradition, and that the American comedic tradition was filled by Jews, because laughter is woven into the fabric in the way we respond to the world, and that it's an indication of a deep and abiding joy. In less than 2 weeks, at our upcoming holiday of Passover, we sit at our Seder dinner tables and we recall the bad stuff, our days as slaves, our lack of freedom, our inability to create our own destiny. but then we rejoice. We recite psalms of happiness and envision a world of joy and peace. The rabbis made sure that the story we tell at our Passover table focuses a little on the slavery and a lot on the liberation. Not that the pain is not real and not because we don't mourn, but right now, at this moment, we are alive. We feel the wonder of God's world. We appreciate the humor and the irony of being here and being allowed to participate in all the many wonderful and varied things that this world brings. I cannot tell you the joy I feel that I live in a day and age and in a country where I can ascend a pulpit in this beautiful church with a colleague who I admire and treasure, with a community that welcomes me sometimes better than my own, and share with you words of my tradition. On this day, I truly feel the blessings of God's world. You know, I remember once looking around my library and I realized that even though there are still many books in my library I want to read or reread, I keep ordering more books. And so I once said to a friend, you know, I'm starting to despair because there are all these books I really want to read, and I know I'm never going to have time to read them all. And my friend told me, that's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is, you will never lack for a good book. It's all how you see it. There are more pleasures in this world, good, deep, legitimate, wonderful pleasures than you can experience in 100 lifetimes. But instead of letting that lead you to despair, it should lead you to joy. It means that every day you can experience some new joy or re-experience some joy that you remember with affection and with love. What this time of year should remind us as we celebrate Passover and Easter is that there are unexpected twists and turns in God's world, that losses sometimes lead to gains, that pains pave the way to joy, that there are all sorts of things in this world that you don't expect and you don't anticipate, but they can take you by the hand to a new place. The English author Maurice Samuel wrote his autobiography and called it The Gentleman and the Jew. And he talked about how growing up in England, he idealized the idea of the gentleman, the Shakespearean hero who died in a sword fight with a joke on his lips. And as a young man, that seemed like such a wonderful way to be. And then he looked at the Jews in his neighborhood who were so serious and always bent over a book and always discussing earnest things. And he thought, that's not the way to be. I want to be like the sword-fighting gentleman. But as he got older, he realized there was a glint of holy joy, a deep current of appreciation of the goodness of the world in the eye of that old Jew. That the world seemed to them not frivolous, not superficial, but sacred, deep, beautiful, and joyous. And so Samuel changed his vocation and became a sort of itinerant preacher of the Jewish tradition. And he translated the great comedic Jewish classics like Shalom Aleichem into English for the first time. And he spread that tradition of beautiful and humorous writing all over the world. It is true that we like jokes and we like laughter, but deeper than that is the recognition that God has given us this day. We may have tomorrow and we may not. We may have next year and we may not. But we have this day. Ze hayom asa Adonai, nagila v'nismecha bo, says the Jewish tradition. It teaches, and I bet your tradition teaches this as well, that this is the day God has made. Rejoice in it and be happy. In every day there should be some joy. After all, that's why God gave us this magnificent, this beautiful world, so that we might enjoy it and we might enjoy each other, and by our joy, draw closer to the God who gave us this blessing. Thank you.